My daughter, Jessica, said our dinner was canceled. She was exhausted, she texted, and just wanted a quiet night in. But when I arrived at the restaurant, hoping for a solitary meal, I found them. My daughter, her husband, and his parents all feasting on my dime, living it up on my emergency credit card. I knew in that moment I couldn't let it slide. So right before the bill arrived, I called the bank, froze the card, and I waited for the show to begin. What happened next was the most painful, yet liberating moment of my life. Before we get into all the details of that night, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. It's a quiet, rainy evening here in Austin, Texas. Drop your city or country in the comments and let me know what time it is where you are. It's amazing to think of us all connecting through these stories. The rain in Austin that evening had a soft, melancholic rhythm, tapping against the windows of my small retirement bungalow. It was the kind of night that made you want to curl up with a good book, but I had been looking forward to dinner. At 66, a widow for 5 years now, these small outings were my way of staying connected to the world, of not letting the silence of an empty house swallow me whole. The text message from Jessica had lit up my phone an hour earlier, its blue light stark in the dimming room. "Hey Mom, so sorry, have to cancel tonight. Little Chloe is teething and I'm just drained. Rain check soon. Love you." I sighed, a familiar mix of disappointment and maternal sympathy washing over me. Of course, I understood. Jessica was a new mother and her husband, Brian, was still trying to get his consulting business off the ground. They were struggling. I knew it because she told me so. Her voice often tight with worry over the phone. That's why I'd given her the emergency credit card in the first place. A safety net for groceries, for diapers, for gas money when things got tight during her unpaid maternity leave. "Just for emergencies, sweetheart," I had told her, pressing the cool silver plastic into her hand. "I trust you." The word trust didn't feel bitter then. It felt like love. It felt like purpose. Staring out at the rain-slicked street, I decided I wouldn't let the change of plans ruin my evening entirely. I'd still go to the Gilded Spoon. It was our special occasion place, mine and my late husband's, and now a place I took Jessica when I wanted to treat her. The thought of their rich, creamy pasta and a glass of bold Cabernet was a comforting lure. I'd just have a quiet meal by myself. A little self-care, I told myself as I pulled on my coat. It was better than sitting at home, dwelling on the quiet. I grabbed my purse, the drizzle chilling my cheeks as I walked to the car, completely unaware that the quiet evening I had planned was about to be shattered. I walked into the Gilded Spoon expecting nothing more than a plate of pasta, but I was about to stumble upon a truth that would change the entire landscape of my relationship with my only daughter. The moment I pushed open the heavy oak door of the Gilded Spoon, a wave of warmth and the low, comforting hum of conversation washed over me. The hostess smiled, her face familiar, but my eyes were drawn past her, toward the large picture window overlooking the glittering lights of downtown Austin. And that's when I saw her. It was Jessica, my daughter. She was not at home, exhausted with a teething baby. She was sitting at the restaurant's best table, a prime spot bathed in the golden glow of a crystal chandelier. Her head was thrown back in laughter, a carefree, joyous sound that echoed in the space between us. It was the sound I hadn't heard from her in months. In her hand was a delicate champagne flute filled with bubbling gold. Across from her sat my son-in-law, Brian, looking smug and expansive in a crisp button-down shirt. And beside them, beaming with pride, were his parents, Brenda and Tom. The table was a work of art, a feast laid out for royalty. There was a towering platter of oysters on ice, plates of seared scallops, what looked like lobster tails, and carafes of red and white wine. It wasn't a simple dinner. It was a celebration, a spectacle. And I was not on the guest list. I froze, my hand still on the door, my coat still damp. The hostess started to say something, but the words wouldn't register. All I could hear was my daughter's laughter, and each peal felt like a physical blow. It wasn't the sound of her happiness that hurt.
It was the crushing realization that she had worked so hard, had constructed such a simple, believable lie specifically to ensure I wasn't there to share in it. My invitation hadn't been lost, it had been deliberately withheld. I felt the blood drain from my face. My body was rooted to the spot by the hostess stand, half hidden by a large potted ficus. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was an intruder at my own family's party, a ghost watching a life I was apparently funding but was no longer welcome to inhabit. Every canceled plan from the past year, every too busy weekend, every next time mom holiday flashed through my mind. Had they all been like this? My daughter playing the generous hostess, the perfect daughter-in-law, while I sat at home eating a frozen dinner, wondering what I had done wrong to make her so distant? The distance wasn't an accident of a busy life. It was a choice. It was a carefully constructed wall. And tonight, I had just walked straight into it. And just when I thought the shock couldn't get deeper, a young waiter approached me with a kind smile, and the words he spoke next would plunge the knife in even deeper, twisting it with a truth so horrifying that it made the scene in front of me feel like a pleasant dream. The waiter was young, with kind eyes and a name tag that read Leo. He must have been new. I didn't recognize him. He saw me standing there, looking lost, and approached with a gentle smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Are you waiting for a table?" he asked, his voice soft. Before I could form a response, he glanced toward Jessica's table, then back at me, and a look of recognition dawned on his face. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Thompson, Jessica's mom, right? Welcome, welcome." I could only nod, my throat tight. "It's so good to finally meet you," he continued, completely oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. "They talk about you all the time." He gestured vaguely toward the laughing group. "Don't you worry about a thing tonight. We'll just put it all on your card, as always." As always. The two words hit me with the force of a physical impact. They echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my mind. On your card, as always. My pulse went cold, a glacial chill spreading through my veins. I looked from his innocent, smiling face to the table across the room. I saw the buttery leather of the Fendi handbag slung over Jessica's chair, a bag she swore she bought secondhand for a steal. I saw the heavy gold Rolex glinting on Brian's wrist as he raised his glass, a far cry from the modest steel watch he used to wear.
And I finally understood. The emergency card, the one I'd given her with such love, with such trust, the one she'd accepted with tears in her eyes in my kitchen, the baby on her hip, telling me she didn't know how they'd make it through the month. "It's just for essentials, Mom. Groceries, formula, I promise." That promise now lay shattered at my feet, along with my heart. This wasn't an emergency. This was extravagance. This was a lifestyle. My money wasn't a safety net. It had become their personal slush fund for luxury dinners and designer goods. The essentials were oysters and champagne. The emergencies were keeping up appearances for the in-laws. I thought of the Sunday dinners I used to host, the way she'd always call me Mama when she wanted a second helping of my roast potatoes. I thought of the late-night calls when she'd say she just needed to hear my voice. Were those moments real? Or were they just part of the performance, little deposits of affection to ensure the bank of mom stayed open? The sound of their laughter reached me again, and this time it sounded different. It sounded like mockery. They were laughing at me, laughing at my naivete, my unconditional love, my endless well of support that they had been gleefully draining dry. I stood there, hidden by the plant, my world tilting on its axis. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it almost stopped my breath. I knew in that gut-wrenching moment that I couldn't just turn around and walk away. I couldn't let this continue. But what could I do? If I stormed over there, I'd be the hysterical, overbearing mother. They would twist it, deny it, gaslight me into thinking I was the one in the wrong. I needed proof.
I needed a plan, and I had to know just how deep this deception really ran. My first step was to talk to the manager, but I was about to discover that even the restaurant staff seemed to be part of their elaborate charade. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I forced my legs to move. I slipped past the hostess stand and made my way toward the back of the restaurant, where the manager's podium was located. Mr. Harrison was a tall, imposing man in a perfectly tailored suit, his silver hair slicked back. He exuded an air of authority and control. I had seen him here for years, always overseeing the floor with a hawk's eye. I approached him quietly, waiting for him to finish speaking with a waiter. When he turned to me, his smile was professional but lacked any real warmth. "May I help you, madam?" "Yes," I began, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "My name is Carol Thompson. I believe there may be some unauthorized charges on a credit card of mine that is frequently used here. I was hoping you could print out a list of the recent transactions for me." His polite smile faltered for just a second. He glanced over my shoulder, his eyes darting toward Jessica's table and then back to me. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Mrs. Thompson. We have a very strict privacy policy. We cannot release a customer's billing information to a third party." "But I'm not a third party," I insisted, my frustration mounting. "It's my name on the account. The card belongs to me." "Be that as it may," he continued, crossing his arms, "the card is on file under Mr. Brian Thompson's reservation profile. He and his family are some of our most valued, regular customers. I cannot simply hand over their private information based on an unsubstantiated claim." Valued customers. My stomach churned. They were valued customers because of my money. The irony was suffocating. He was protecting them, the perpetrators, from me, the victim. He was treating me like a crazy old woman making baseless accusations. The humiliation stung. "I am telling you, that card is mine and it is being misused," I said, my voice rising slightly despite my best efforts. "I just need to see the proof." Mr. Harrison held up a hand, stopping me. "Ma'am, I am not going to argue with you. If you have an issue with your credit card, I suggest you take it up with your bank. As for the gilded spoon, we have done nothing wrong. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a restaurant to run." He turned away from me, a clear dismissal, leaving me standing there feeling foolish and utterly powerless. He was part of their world, a world of polish and privilege that I was paying for, but was firmly locked out of. He wouldn't help me. He was protecting them. The system was rigged against me. I felt a wave of despair, the kind that makes you just want to give up, go home, and pretend none of this ever happened. I retreated, my cheeks burning, and found a small, unoccupied bench in a dimly lit alcove near the restrooms, trying to compose myself. It seemed I had hit a dead end. But as I sat there trying to figure out my next move, I overheard a conversation from the hallway behind me, one not meant for my ears, one that would reveal a layer of manipulation so cruel and calculated that it would steal the very air from my lungs.
I sat frozen on the bench, my hands clenched into fists in my lap. The world narrowed to a single point of searing, white-hot rage. This wasn't just entitlement. This wasn't just greed. This was a level of cold, calculated manipulation that I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. She hadn't just stolen my money. She had stolen my peace of mind. She had turned my love and concern for her into a weapon to be used against me. She had built her castle of lies on a foundation of my trust and then had the audacity to mock me for it. The hurt, the sadness, the confusion, it all evaporated in that moment, burned away by a pure, clarifying fury. The easy-to-handle mother was done being handled. The game was over. She thought she had played me perfectly, but she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had just shown me her true face, and now I was going to show her mine. This was no longer just about a credit card. This was about reclaiming my dignity. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Hearing that from your own child? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and I honestly need to know if my reaction was justified. I didn't move from the bench for a full 5 minutes. I just sat there, in the dim light, letting the cold fury settle into something hard and sharp in my chest. There would be no tears. Not anymore. Tears were for the woman who thought her daughter loved her. The woman sitting here now was someone different. She was a woman who had been played for a fool, and she was done with the game. My hands, which had been trembling, were now perfectly steady. I pulled my phone from my purse, its screen a beacon in the darkness of the alcove. My first stop was my banking app. I didn't need Mr. Harrison's permission to see the truth. The truth was right here, in stark black and white. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. The Gilded Spoon, $450. The Gilded Spoon, $620. A charge from Neiman Marcus for $1,200. A spa day at a luxury resort for $800. The dates lined up perfectly with all the times Jessica had told me she was too sick to visit, too broke to go out, too tired to cook. While I was at home reheating leftovers, worried sick about them, they were living a life I couldn't even afford for myself, all on my dime. The total over the last 3 months was staggering. Nearly $12,000. Not on groceries, not on gas, not on emergencies, on a fantasy. I methodically took a screenshot of every single transaction. I emailed the photos to myself and then to my secure cloud storage with the subject line, Financial Abuse, Jessica Thompson. Evidence. Documentation. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means you come prepared. With the proof secured, it was time to formulate the plan. A public confrontation would be messy. She would cry. She would make me the villain. I needed something cleaner, something with surgical precision, an action that would speak louder than any words I could ever scream. My finger hovered over the contacts icon, then I swiped to the phone's keypad. I dialed the number on the back of the credit card, the 24/7 customer service line. The automated voice on the other end was a calm counterpoint to the storm inside me. I navigated the menus, my voice low and even as I confirmed my identity. How can I help you tonight, Mrs. Thompson? I would like to freeze one of my credit cards. Effective immediately. Of course, I can do that for you. Is the card lost or stolen? I paused. No, I said, a grim smile touching my lips for the first time that night. It's exactly where it's supposed to be. I glanced at the clock on my phone. It was 8:50 p.m. They would be well into their main courses by now, maybe ordering another bottle of that expensive wine. Actually, I amended, my voice dropping even lower, an idea sparking in my mind. Can you schedule the freeze? I don't want it to happen right this second. Can you set it for exactly 9:15 p.m. Central Time? There was a brief pause on the other end, the sound of typing. Yes, ma'am, we can do that. Freeze scheduled for card ending in 4227 at 9:15 sharp. Is there anything else? No, that will be all. I hung up the phone. The trap was set. They had about 25 minutes left of their fantasy life. I planned to let them enjoy every last second of it before the real bill came due. With the plan in motion, a strange sense of calm descended upon me. It was the calm of inevitability. I left a dark alcove and found a small 2-person table at the far end of the bar, one that gave me a clear, unobstructed view of their table without being directly in their line of sight. I ordered a black coffee, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic mug. I needed to keep my hands busy. I needed to watch. From my new vantage point, I was a silent observer of their final act. The performance was flawless. I watched Jessica lean in and whisper something to her mother-in-law, Brenda, who then patted her hand with a fond smile. I watched Brian hold forth, gesturing with a fork, likely telling some story where he was the hero. He was holding court, a king in a castle I had paid for. They were the perfect picture of family, of success, of happiness.
A picture built on a foundation of lies. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. I opened it. Jessica had just posted a photo. It was a beautifully framed shot of their table, the candlelight glinting off the crystal glasses, the lavish spread of food in perfect focus. The caption read, "Nothing better than a spontaneous family celebration. So blessed to have these amazing people in my life. Hashtag family first, hashtag blessed, hashtag good times." Family first. The hypocrisy was so blatant, it was almost comical. I was her family and I was sitting 30 feet away, alone, after being told she was too tired to see me. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, but it helped to ground me. I watched them finish their main courses. The waiter, Leo, cleared their plates with practiced efficiency. Then he presented them with the dessert menus. Of course, they ordered dessert. Tiramisu for Jessica, a molten chocolate lava cake for Brian, and a creme brulee for Brenda to just have a bite of. They were going all out, running up the tab, completely oblivious to the fact that the clock was ticking down on their free ride. 9:10 p.m. The desserts arrived, exquisite creations of sugar and cream. 9:12 p.m. Brian signaled for the check, pulling my credit card from his wallet with an air of casual ownership that made my stomach clench. He didn't even look at it. He just handed it to Leo. 9:14 p.m. Leo walked towards the payment terminal at the hostess stand.
My heart began to pound, a steady, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment of reckoning. I was no longer a victim hiding in the shadows. I was the architect of their downfall, and I was about to witness my creation come to life. I knew I should probably leave, that the mature thing to do was to not watch the fallout, but I couldn't. I had to see it. I had to see the look on their faces when the ground crumbled beneath their feet. The seconds between 9:14 and 9:15 p.m. stretched into an eternity. I watched Leo at the payment terminal, his back to me. He swiped the card. He paused, looking at the screen. He swiped it again. I saw his shoulders slump just a fraction. He turned around, the black bill folio still in his hand, and began the slow walk back to their table. His kind, open face from earlier was now a mask of professional neutrality, but I could see the slight furrow in his brow. He knew he was delivering bad news. He reached their table just as the clock on my phone ticked over to 9:15 p.m. Jessica was in the middle of telling a story, her hands animated. Brian was leaning back in his chair, looking utterly content. Brenda was reapplying her lipstick. They were all in their own little bubble of blissful ignorance. Leo cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson?" Brian looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Yes?" "I'm very sorry, sir," Leo began, his voice low but audible enough for me to hear in the tense silence. "The card. It was declined." The effect was instantaneous. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on their entire table. Jessica's hands froze mid-gesture. Brian's smug smile vanished, replaced by a frown of disbelief. "What? That's impossible. Run it again." "I did, sir. I ran it twice. It says the account has been frozen." "Frozen?" Brian scoffed, a flush creeping up his neck. "That's ridiculous. There must be a mistake. It's a corporate card with no limit." A corporate card. The lie was so audacious, I almost laughed out loud. He was so used to the fantasy that he actually believed it himself. "Perhaps you could try another card," Leo suggested politely, his eyes avoiding theirs. The atmosphere at the table had shifted from festive to frigid. The bubble had burst. Jessica wasn't laughing anymore. She was staring at Brian, her eyes wide with a dawning panic. This was not a part of her perfect script. This was an unscripted disaster, and the spotlight was now glaring down on them. Brian, fumbling, pulled out his own wallet. I saw him glance inside, his face tightening. It was clear he didn't have a backup plan.
he didn't have another card that could handle a bill of this size. The king, it turned out, had no clothes. And just then, as if on cue, my phone vibrated on the table in front of me, displaying the first beautiful, satisfying notification of the night.
I allowed myself a small, tight smile. It wasn't a smile of warmth or forgiveness. It was the smile of a predator that has finally cornered its prey. I let the silence stretch for a few more heartbeats, enjoying the exquisite tension, the beautiful, chaotic confusion I had created. Then I spoke, my voice perfectly calm, perfectly level, and loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear clearly. "Well, Jessica," I said, pulling out the empty chair at their table, "since it appears this entire dinner is on me, I thought I should probably join you. I've been so grateful to have you all on this journey with me tonight. It's not an easy story to tell. If you're still here, still listening, could you do me a favor and just comment with the number 1? It would mean the world to me to know who has stuck with me this far. Thank you." I slid into the empty chair, placing my purse deliberately on the table in front of me. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpeting. The other diners, who had been pretending not to notice, were now openly staring. We were the evening's entertainment. "Mom, I can explain," Jessica began, her voice trembling. "Can you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, turning the screen so they could all see it. I swiped through the screenshots of my bank statements, the long, damning list of charges from the Gilded Spoon, from designer boutiques, from high-end spas. "Can you explain nearly $12,000 in 3 months, Jessica? Can you explain how groceries and diapers turned into caviar and champagne?" Her face crumpled. She had no explanation. There was no lie big enough to cover this. I didn't stop there. I turned my gaze to her, my voice still even, but now laced with ice. "And while you're at it, maybe you can tell me more about this Mr. Gable, your imaginary financial advisor, the one who so conveniently advised me to cut back on my own spending so you could fund this charade." That was the final blow. Jessica flinched as if I had slapped her. Brenda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she looked at her daughter-in-law with new eyes. She finally understood the depth of the deception. Brian just stared at me, his mouth agape, speechless for the first time all night. He hadn't known about that particular lie. It was a secret between my daughter and me. Or so she thought. "You didn't just lie to me, Jessica. You manipulated me. You used my love for you, my trust in you, as a tool to get what you wanted. You built this entire fantasy life on my back while making me feel guilty for wanting to buy myself a new pair of shoes. You let me sit at home worrying about you while you were here laughing and drinking and spending my money without a second thought." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. I wanted them to feel the full weight of them. I wanted them to understand that this wasn't about the money. It was about the profound disrespect, the utter lack of love. It was about the profound realization that my presence in her life was optional, but my wallet was essential. I looked at her. My daughter, the little girl I had raised, and I felt nothing but a cold, empty space where my love used to be. The person sitting in front of me was a stranger, a con artist who happened to have my eyes, and I was done being her mark. I let the silence sit for a moment longer, allowing the full horror of the situation to settle over their table. Jessica was openly crying now, silent tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Brenda and Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. Brian looked like he was about to explode. "This is a private family matter," he finally managed to grit out. "It became a public matter the moment you started using my money to impress people in a public restaurant. And it's not a family matter anymore, Brian. It's a financial settlement."
I turned my attention back to the young waiter, Leo, who was still standing nearby, looking like a deer caught in the headlights. "Leo," I said, my voice kind but firm. "As I said, please split this bill, $875.50, I believe, 4 ways. One for him," I nodded at Brian, "one for her," I gestured to Jessica, "and one for each of your parents. I will not be paying a single cent." "You can't do that," Brian snarled. "This is humiliating." "No," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Humiliating is being a grown man who takes his in-laws out for a fancy dinner using his wife's mother's emergency credit card. That is humiliating. Paying for your own meal is called being an adult. You should try it sometime." My words hit their mark. He recoiled, his face turning a blotchy red. I stood up from the chair. My part in this drama was over. "I gave you that card for when you were struggling," I said, my final words addressed to Jessica, though I looked at them all. "I did not give it to you so you could entertain your in-laws and pretend to be something you're not, all while telling me you were too tired to have dinner with your own mother. This lavish lifestyle you've been living, it ends tonight. The account is closed permanently. You are on your own." I picked up my purse. I didn't need to say another word. The damage was done. The truth was out there, laid bare on the white linen tablecloth for everyone to see. Their perfect evening, their perfect image, and their funding were all in ruins. I had taken away their stage, their props, and their funding, all in one fell swoop. Now, it was up to them to figure out how to pay the price, both literally and figuratively. And as I turned to walk away, I knew their night was far from over. I didn't run. I walked. My steps were measured and even as I crossed the dining room. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on my back, but I didn't care. I kept my head held high. For the first time in a long time, I had nothing to be ashamed of. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could imagine the scene I was leaving behind. The 4 of them trapped at that table by the massive bill and the even more massive weight of their public disgrace. I could picture Brenda fumbling in her purse for her wallet, her cheeks burning with shame that wasn't even hers. I could see Tom, a proud man, forced to pull out his billfold with a resigned sigh to cover his son's deceit. And I could picture Brian and Jessica sitting in a toxic silence, the beautiful illusion of their partnership shattered. What would they say to each other in the car on the way home? What blame would be cast? What new lies would be spun? Frankly, I no longer cared. It was their mess to clean up. As I reached the heavy oak door, Mr. Harrison, the manager, stepped forward as if to say something. He opened his mouth, but I just gave him a cool, level stare, and he shut his again. I had become a force he couldn't handle, a problem he couldn't dismiss. I had won.
I pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool, damp Austin night. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled clean and fresh. It felt like the world had been washed clean, just for me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet air of freedom. It was the first breath I had taken all night that wasn't tight with pain or rage. It was a breath of pure, unadulterated relief. The door of the Gilded Spoon closed softly behind me, muffling the sounds of my former life. I walked to my car, my heels clicking a steady, triumphant rhythm on the wet pavement. I didn't feel giddy or victorious. I simply felt lighter, as if I had been carrying a massive, invisible weight on my shoulders for years and had finally set it down. It was the weight of unreciprocated love, of one-sided effort, of constantly giving to people who only knew how to take. I slid into the driver's seat of my car and sat there for a moment in the quiet darkness. I had done it. I had faced the ugly truth and stood up for myself. I had drawn a line in the sand. But as I started the engine, I knew there was one final, symbolic act I needed to perform at home. A private ritual to seal the decision I had made so publicly. The night wasn't quite over yet. The drive home was different. The streets of Austin were quiet, the traffic lights reflecting like jewels on the wet asphalt. Usually, on my drives home alone, my mind would be busy, replaying conversations, worrying about Jessica, thinking of ways I could help. But tonight, my mind was blessedly, beautifully silent. The constant loop of anxiety was gone. In its place was a profound sense of peace. When I pulled into my driveway, the soft glow of my porch light felt welcoming. For years, I had been the one keeping the lights on for everyone else, waiting for them, worrying about them. Tonight, I was coming home to myself. I walked into my quiet house, dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, and went straight to the old wooden desk in my study. It was where I kept all my important papers, my financial documents, my life neatly organized in manila folders. I opened the bottom drawer, the one labeled Finances. Tucked in the very back, inside a crisp bank envelope, was a second credit card. It had the same account number as the one Jessica had been using. I had ordered it as a backup for myself, just in case, but had always secretly thought of it as another safety net for her, for a day when a real emergency might strike. I slid the card from the envelope. It was pristine, the silver numbers gleaming under the lamplight. I ran my thumb over my embossed name, Carol M. Thompson. I thought of the day I'd activated the first card, the hope I had felt, the genuine belief that I was doing a good and loving thing as a mother. I remembered Jessica's hug, her promise that it was just until things get better. Things had gotten better for them. They just had gotten worse for me. I opened the desk drawer again and took out a heavy pair of office scissors. I held the card in one hand and the scissors in the other. There was no hesitation, no second thought. With one clean, decisive motion, I cut the card in half. Snip. The sound was sharp and final in the quiet room. It was surprisingly loud. I wasn't done. I cut each half into quarters, and the quarters into tiny, unrecognizable slivers of silver and blue plastic. I kept cutting until it was nothing but confetti, a pile of glittering dust that could never be put back together again. It wasn't just about a piece of plastic. It was a ritual. It was about reclaiming every inch of ground I had ceded in the name of keeping the peace. It was about severing the financial cord that had morphed into a leash. I had finally understood that love without respect isn't love at all. It's a transaction. And tonight, I had officially closed my tab. The pieces of the card lay on my desk like the remnants of a life I was leaving behind. I swept at the plastic shards from my desk into the trash can, and as they clattered to the bottom, I felt the last bit of tension leave my body. The chapter was closed. Of course, I knew there would be fallout. There always is when you stop playing the part someone else has written for you. Sometime in the next few days, my phone would ring. It would be Jessica. She would have had time to craft a new narrative, a new set of excuses. There might be tears, there might be rage, there might be desperate pleas for forgiveness. She would try to pull me back into the old dance, the familiar rhythm of guilt and obligation. But this time, I would be ready. I wouldn't engage, I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't offer explanations. My answer would be the same truth I served them at the Gilded Spoon. A firm, quiet, and unshakable no. The Bank of Mom was permanently closed for withdrawals. All that was left was the hope that one day she might learn how to make a deposit of her own through genuine love and respect. But I wouldn't be holding my breath. That night, I learned one of the hardest and most important lessons of my life. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. My value as a mother, as a person,
is not determined by how much I can give, but by the love and respect I receive in return. Forcing my daughter and her husband to face the consequences of their actions wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of profound self-love. It was me finally deciding that I was worthy of respect. I was worthy of honesty. I was worthy of being more than just a means to an end. I walked over to my window and looked out at the quiet, sleeping street. A new day was coming. It would be different. It might be lonelier in some ways, but it would be a loneliness of my own choosing, an honest solitude, not the false companionship I had been paying for. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, deeply at peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story tonight. It means more than you know. So many of us, especially as we get older, find ourselves in situations where our kindness is mistaken for weakness. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to draw a difficult boundary to protect your own peace and dignity, please share your thoughts or even your own experiences in the comments below. Let's remind each other that we are not alone in these struggles. Please give this video a like if it moved you, and subscribe for more stories about navigating the complicated world of family, finances, and finding your own strength. You are all appreciated.